Next in our conversation with Dr. Rudolph Hanzi, Kennedy Professor of Neurology at Harvard Medical School, neuroscientist and geneticist, Director of Genetics and Aging at Mass General Hospital. We're going to talk about genes, not the ones you're wearing right now, not the clothing, but those little things inside our cells that seem to have all the information and technology to create ourselves in a way. So, Rudy, tell us, what is a gene?
Gene is a single little packet of DNA, the chemical DNA, which is able to, in most cases, produce a protein. And if you look at the body physically, it's water, fat, protein. There are about 25,000 to 30,000 genes. They produce about 250,000, maybe 300,000 proteins because they're multifunctional. And if you look at all of our DNA, the genes themselves that produce these little factories for the proteins, in some cases genes also regulate other genes that make proteins, so it's not all simply one type. But if you look at all of the genes and you say what percent of our DNA do they make up, it's only about 4%. So the rest of the DNA, it's kind of like thinking about 4% of the matter in the universe is something we can see, baryonic matter. The rest is dark matter, dark energy. Well, in the DNA, we only really understand 4% of the DNA. That's the genes that actually make the proteins. The rest of the DNA is either regulating those genes or lying in wait for further evolution.
When we start out life as a double-stranded molecule of DNA, I hope I'm using the terminology correctly. We start life, and that double-stranded molecule of DNA starts to create proteins, as you said, but it also starts to replicate itself. Mm-hmm. And I'm told that within about 50 replications, you have between 60 to almost 100 trillion, nobody knows the exact number, cells that make up the entire body. So would you say that then this DNA that is making up all the genes, because DNA is everything, right? Mm-hmm. Deoxyribonucleic acid is everything, and then certain segments are defined as genes, the protein producing segments. This is the code of life. And I remember when President Clinton announced the Genome Project in 2001 in the White House. He said, we have discovered the alphabet that God used to create life. Is that an accurate kind of statement?
Yes, it is. And DNA is not only the code and the alphabet of life, it is a physical history of life, because our DNA is so similar to the DNA of a potato or a banana. There are similarities between our DNA and a lowly bacteria, one cell organism. So DNA has been going through this evolution for millions of years, more than many millions of years, to reach this stage of now a biological organism as complicated as us. So when DNA first has to create a new human life, there's this beautifully, masterfully orchestrated dance between the genes. It's not just genes producing proteins, at will and hoping they come together the right way. It's a self-organizing system, right? These genes are regulating each other. Negative, positive feedback loops, all interacting with each other so you make just the right number of proteins at just the right time, in just the right place to produce a human body. The wisdom behind DNA is so far beyond our knowledge. I think it will be way beyond our knowledge for maybe centuries to try to understand how much wisdom there is of how DNA works.
You provoke a lot of thoughts right now, when I think of the alphabet of any language, and we're now talking about the alphabet of life. Then we say, with this alphabet, I can write a word, I can write a phrase, I can write a sentence, I can write a paragraph, I can write a story, I can write an epic, using the same alphabet. And what you just said to me right now seems like DNA does all of the things that I just mentioned. It creates the physical body, but it's also the epic of creation of life, since the first organisms appeared that learned how to replicate themselves. Perhaps those chemolitho-autotrophic hyperthermophiles that lived on the rim of volcanoes 2 billion years ago, or whatever. All that history of evolution, the story of evolution, is recorded in that DNA. It's the epic of human life and life on the planet.
If DNA were a book, it would be an epic, it would be a saga. It would be like the Odyssey, but it's still being written. Every moment, every day, this Odyssey of our life is a saga being written on DNA every day. And, we don't really know what all this DNA that's not genes are for, but, certainly to help regulate the dance of the genes during development and producing a human. But I tend to think that much of it is there in reserve, to be determined as we continue to evolve our species and new species on Earth. See, the other important thing to remember about DNA